I gotta say, I'm pretty lost in thought when it comes to Dusk Till Dawn. I mean, specializations are very much appearing to be the key thing going forward, and Dusk Till Dawn is definitely shaping up to really just cool down the lightning. I mean, with all the alluring inducement of the set, just how can you not be starstruck? It just seems like this is really going to set the tone for a lot of supplemental sets going forward. And again, I think specializations are definitely the key element. And with them, you know, united we stand. Enjoyable, hopefully. Anyway, this video is more or less just a follow-up to the previous one. So I've had a bit more time to think about it. And yeah, basically the mentality I had, right? Because a big thought was, how do supplemental sets function going forward? How can they possibly support the plethora of variety of Flesh and Blood? And specializations, I mean, they were right in front of us the whole time. Rather than add in a whole bunch of class cards, right? Rather than add in a whole bunch of commons, a whole bunch of rares, why not just tackle specializations, right? You can target specific heroes and you can add a bunch of them in. Which brings me to the next point. So we dabbled on it, but I think I have a clear argument for what I hope to see with Dusk Till Dawn. And essentially, since the spoiler season is right around the corner, I mean, by the end of this week, we'll ramp into high gear with cards coming out. So I just wanted to have one final crack at trying to place a accurate guess for Dusk Till Dawn. And basically what I've come up with is I've gone ahead and mapped out the cards a little bit better so that I could get a better idea of what I possibly think is going to happen. Right, so in yellow are all the cards that have been revealed. So we've got Briar, Ovaltium, and Lexi's Specialization, Bravos, Dorinthia, and Cheyenne. Right, but then we've got all these slots in between. And the general thought is, you know, that we'll see the standard Brute cards, Guardian cards, Ninja cards, Warrior cards, essentially just basic cards for every single class, as we've seen in all the previous supplemental sets. But I definitely think going forward that this is a pretty cool concept to think about and a good way for supplemental sets to function in the future, right? They have this core theme. So Dusk Till Dawn will focus heavily on light and shadow again, similar to Monarch, but tacked on at the end of the set are the playable cards, the cards that are meant to actually support the larger spectrum of the player base, right? So again, my main idea is that all of these back-end cards are going to be specific hero specializations. So that's what I've done. I've mapped out all the different heroes. So this is essentially the Blitz variation, so every single hero in the game. So we've got Draconic branch, right? So the Drakai, FaB, and Dromai. Then we have Monarch, Prism, Bolton, Levia, Chain, and Vizet. So I've included Chain, even though Living Legend. And the rationale for this is just to fill in the slots, basically. And I will say that this first attempt at doing just that isn't completely accurate, right? I don't hold a lot of faith in this being the key concept, but it does a nice job, right? Fleshes everything out. There is one big glaring issue with it, and that is that Icelander is missing. So you'd expect it to be a Frost card, right? Because she's the Frost Wizard. But Anthem of the Spring, 196. Northern Winds, 197. And Cooldown Lightning, 198. So if it was Ice, we'd probably expect it to slot in there, right? Because it seems like they've tied all the elementals together, because we've got Runeblade, Guardian, and then Ranger. So I don't know where to put her, nor do I have room in this current model. Okay, so again, Draconic, Light and Shadow, Elemental, and then we go through the normal setup. So I use Dynasty as an example. So it goes Brute, Guardian, Ninja, Warrior, Mechanologist, Ranger, Runeblade, Mage, and then the Novelty and Assassin. So it's a decent attempt. I do have some issues with it. Again, that Icelander is missing, and if Icelander is missing, then, you know, for instance, the Draconic being tacked on here, that doesn't quite make sense, right? If we were going to do the themes, I would expect Line Shadow, Elemental, then Draconic, and then all the specific class cards. So I did come up with a better one, just trying to puzzle it out and think about it. But this one does have a few gaps, right? So what I've actually done is I've tried to go through the lore a little bit. Again, I'm not fully caught up on the lore, and I just read briefly. But what I've done is I've just tackled the Heroes of Wraith. Okay, so Uprising and Dynasty, obviously, Drakai is no more. Right, that was the whole point of the uprising. And then we also have the fact that, well, they're at Volca. Where did I say it? Hard to remember new words, right? And then, of course, outsiders. I don't think the outsiders' heroes would play a part in this battle, right? So if we exclude Uzari, Arachne, Riptide, Drakai, Yoji, Arachne, Dromai, FaB, I said Arachne twice, and then, of course, Icelander, because she's now with the Uprising cohort, then we get this better example, okay? So again, we still have Light and Shadow, then the Elemental Specializations minus Icelandia, because again, she's not here at this battle. Then we have Brute, Kaio, and Reiner. Then we have Guardian with a gap, so I don't know what's going to go in there. Maybe a new hero. You know, you don't really need to flesh out a lot of support for a new hero nowadays, especially if you pick the classes. So for instance, if we got, say, a Light Guardian, yes, it would be nice to see some Light Guardian actions, but it's not necessarily needed. Or, you know, you could chuck in Levia here instead, since she is a Brute. Then we have Ninja, so Ira, Benji, and Katsu. Then Kasai and Dorinthia for Warrior, Dash and Data Doll for Mechanologist. Azalea without Riptide, because I missed a letter. Without Riptide, because, you know, he's part of the Outsiders set, and I don't think we'd see new support for him being not only a set before, but also in terms of the lore. Then Vizari, Kano, Cheyenne, and the two merchant heroes, so Cavdine and Genus. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, since they are all here as the Heroes of Wraith. And I think this does a better job of tackling all the slots. Again, there are these two gaps, which you could fill in if you sort of shuffle things around and put the merchant heroes, you know, a bit earlier. Again, you can't really change where Bravo and Dorinthia are, so it makes sense for the other warrior heroes to be around them and the guardian heroes to be around them. But yeah, I think this is a decent attempt at understanding the layout. Again, if you say exclude Prism, because I assume we'll get a bunch of new cards for Prism, especially with the fact that the whole mechanic has shifted greatly. So I haven't actually tackled any of the new cards, right? Going through their actual abilities and talking about that. We'll leave it for the spoiler season, but essentially we have Figments now, okay? And that's essentially Prism's Ash, right? So no longer the Spectral Shield tokens, and they're more in line with the Dusk cards from Dynasty. So, for instance, here it says, you may search your deck for a Figment, right? So that's a big component, because that means that these material cards are going to consume slots in your deck, and we haven't seen any sort of cards that hint at a way for her to generate a token variant, which is, I think, a decent way of balancing Illusionist, right? So rather than just create cards, you now have this fact that they can create these creatures that, you know, need, it's 6, right, to deal with Phantasm, which is only really playing to the strength of Brute, Guardian, a little bit of Warrior, not so much Assassin, Ninja. I don't think Ranger has that many heavy-hitting cards either. So I do think taking up deck slots is a great way to handle balancing. And in saying that, I could see her being left out from this slot, in which case, you know, you could stick Bolton near Dorinthia, push these down, right? And then stick Levia with Reiner and Kaio. So that pushes that down. Vizet will be handled in the set. Prism will be handled in the set. And Chain, you know, since Vizet's replacing him anyway, we don't necessarily need a specialization for him. And that way we've tackled all of the major classes, right? So everyone has a new specialization to play with. It would be a bit unfortunate if Yoji doesn't get a specialization. So I do like this model better, because it does, again, include every single hero and slots them in nicely. The other issue is the Majestics. So this is running a lot of the Majestic count in Specializations. I do think it's what we're gearing up to see with the Haydn count, right? So for the supplemental sets, we've 36 in Crew, 45 in FFS, 51 in Dynasty, and now 56 in Dusk Till Dawn. If you were to take out the Royal cards from Dynasty, right, this would be more in line with Everfest. So Dusk Till Dawn is, you know, a pretty greater amount of Majestics, and you don't have the fact that we're introducing a new hero yet. There might be a new hero, you never know, but we don't have Assassin like Dynasty, where we needed a bunch of extra cards to support the new class. So I can see a lot of them contributing to this specialization list. And I do think it sort of makes sense with the card numbers again, with all these specializations being tacked on at the end. The Illusionist is eluding me, right? 218 and 219. What could be here? You know, you could go with more Majestics specific to the classes. I mean, how many classes do we have in total? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Did I do that right? Oh, plus Illusionist, which we already have. Right, so we have 10 more classes to support. So this would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that doesn't quite work. There's not quite enough cards to support that. I guess you could do just Illusionist and Runeblade, right? Because they're the 2 new heroes, so be cards that feed off of the new mechanics, but then we don't see that in Lost in Thought or Flicker Trick. Who knows? I don't know what's going on with the early stuff. I don't know what's going on with the end stuff, but I think this is a solid guess at the middle stuff here, right? So yeah, just before we get to the spoiler season, I want to have one last crack at coming up with a concept that works, and obviously my previous guess of Cheyenne support doesn't work, because 2 slots for extra Shiner cards. I mean, yeah, 3 cards are better than no cards, but at this point, I would say 1 card is all we're going to see. And I would like to see just all-around specialization cards for all the different heroes. Because again, it would make Dusk Till Dawn a lot more appealing, and it would set a great example for supplemental sets going forward, that we have this core theme for the set, and then we have this little bit of support for every single hero in the game. And that's much more manageable in terms of building the sets going forward. And the fact that they're all Majestics, right? They're meant to be strong cards. Because that's another big thing, is we, in all honesty, don't need more commons and rares for heroes or classes, right? There's not that many new mechanics that they can introduce. Like, the main one we're getting for Dusk Till Dawn is Unity, not United. Unity, right? So to just tack this on to generic cards, or just rare and common class cards, I don't think it works as well, because they are decent effects. So yeah, I am against a majority of rares and commons, which, I mean, is what we're seeing, right? The numbers are heavily decreased. They obviously still need to be there for packs, unless we swap to, even less than 10 cards for the supplemental sets. But as it is, more emphasis on Majestics, more emphasis on, actual playable class cards. Because there is a lot of cards in Dynasty. Outside the talismans and potions of Everfest, there's nothing really for the classes. There's a few cards that obviously have seen play and are strong, but a lot of the bulk of it isn't needed, necessarily. So I think coming back to this core concept of, again, a specific theme for the set, in which case is going to be light and shadow, and then having these extra cards tacked on at the end to continue to support and serve the purpose of the original supplemental sets is a decent concept, and I think I'll tack, let's say, 80% chance, right, that this is what we see. With everything we've seen so far, that it is going to be all specializations. Not 100% for every single class, or what I've laid out here. 100% sure that we're going to see a bunch more specializations. I mean, that's a given at this point, but it could be, all the heroes that are on the light side, for instance, right? Because we know Cheyenne is part of Solana. We've seen Dorinthia. Well, I'm pretty sure at this point they've all been pointing out the lore, right? But they are on the mural leading up to Dusk Till Dawn, the front page image, if you will. So we could see light and then shadow heroes for specializations, which is another way to sort of tie up this end amount, right? How many slots is that? 16 versus 23. Did I do that right? Roughly. So they are similar in number as well. If we were to see, oh, in fact, it's not till there, it's there. So actually, that's fairly close, right? If we were to go all the heroes supporting Solana and then all the heroes supporting the Demonastery. But anyway, yeah. Final guess, right? No Cheyenne support. Well, a little bit of Cheyenne support, no major support. Specializations, but more specifically specializations for every class. And then maybe class-specific cards, something like that. Either way, again, I think this is a really strong template to use for supplemental sets going forward. Again, a core theme, and then this end portion being a strong set of cards to actually support heroes. Anyway, let me know what you think, right? I think this is a better grounded example than the last video. It is basically just a follow-up. But I just wanted to get something out again before the spoiler season starts and we start actually going through the cards and looking at the effects and the strengths, right? So yeah,